I want to bring this back. So I'm going to start actually in chapter 9, because the second principle of our ScaleX framework is purpose and vision. And there's something, and I wasn't aware of this, is paradoxical. You cite this study about 2 decades ago. The world of brain science uncovered an interesting paradox, and what we would expect that the brain of a person with his feet up thinking of nothing and doing nothing would work less hard than the cerebral matter of a mathematician trying to solve an impossible equation. And what it turns out is that essentially what you now call the default mode network is that when we're focused on a long-term goal and lean into that, our brain is less active. Essentially, we get into that flow state, and than whenever actually we don't have those long-term goals or vision to focus on. The paradox is that actually the brain is much more active when we don't. Can you? I have plagiarized what you've referenced there in chapter 9. Can you speak more eloquently as to the importance of purpose and vision in relation to actually calming the mind rather than actually overstimulating the mind?
There is data coming in that suggests that having a sense of purpose, having a goal and a sense of coherence of your life so far and of coherence of your life projected forwards gives you a great sense of resilience and is actually even correlated to lower inflammatory markers in the long run. And you mentioned the default nerve network. So the default nerve network is really the chain of networks in the brain that run along the midline. And they involve different areas. But what we think they do is they act as a scribe of your own autobiography. So they write down what has happened, your brain's version of what has happened so far, and they use that to predict what will happen next, not just in the immediate future, but we are very gifted with this huge part of the front of our brain called the prefrontal cortex. We can imagine, we can dream, and this drives us forward. So this scribe and this default mode network creates an autobiography of yourself, which then projects forward. And this projection forward then influences and guides your behavior. And you can extrapolate so much on this. So we'll come to the business aspect in just a moment, but even more generally, there is data to suggest that people who feel confident about the future and confident about their own ability to age well actually end up living longer. I mentioned that having a sense of coherence and a sense of purpose is tallied to a lower range of inflammatory markers. And I also mention in my book, actually at the start, how anecdotally many doctors will tell you that when they meet patients who come to a crossroad, it's really touch and go, life and death situation, then having a purpose, needing to live for something, a grandchild's wedding perhaps, or the cat needs to be fed at home, who will feed the cat? This kind of purpose can actually even decide whether a patient is going to survive the night. So it just shows you how we tend to reduce the brain and its functions, and we've learned a lot by doing this, and it's very important to do it to an extent. But in our reductionist approach to the brain, we tend to kind of eliminate things that we cannot explain. And this sense of purpose is something that we really have kind of shelved for a long time and kind of put into a box of the unknown and the kind of anecdote. But we are now realizing that this has a very real and very measurable effect on your own future trajectory. So I mentioned life and death, and if you were to scale down rather than scaling up, you can imagine how that affects your decisions in the context of business decision making, taking risks, meeting uncertainty. So if we were to go along the path of meeting uncertainty, which is what scaling up really is to an extent, or it needs to, it encompasses that, even if it isn't that. The point with uncertainty is everyone has a certain level of uncertainty tolerance, or we call it intolerance. So uncertainty intolerance. And uncertainty intolerance has been correlated with anxiety. So people who are anxious tend to be more intolerant of uncertainty than people who are not. And we know that if you are intolerant of uncertainty, one of the reasons is you have a negativity bias. So when you consider all the outcomes, you think more of the negative outcomes. But if we were to tie in what we just said about our autobiography, having a sense of purpose, having a sense of coherence, then you can add the two together, and people who have a sense of purpose and have a sense of achievement as well, they tend to have a more optimistic outlook of lose situations, loss-centered situations. And if you were to approach a novel situation or venturing into unknown with that kind of mindset, then having that sense of purpose will actually shield you a little bit more from the intolerance of uncertainty.